has started.
Okay, welcome everyone. I'm very happy to have you all here. Some of you have been in other webinars. Some of you are new. So I hope this is a different topic, and I hope it's important for you to have this approach as well, and you get the most profit of it. Thank you, Veronica, for joining us in this new experience we are having with PAF. And thank you, Tite Mendoza, FIH Master Coach, for supporting PAF in this initiative. I leave it for you, Veronica, to introduce yourself and tell the audience how you will interact with them. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I believe there is many people from different places in the world, so I'm very excited to share with you a few minutes. I'm going to start a little bit telling you where I am right now. I live in Victoria, British Columbia in Canada, and that is exactly where the building where I am, next to the hockey pitch. So I'm very fortunate to be in an environment that I'm close to, where we can continue discovering what makes a player move from good to great. I hold a doctorate in performance psychology. An emphasis is in coach and athlete expertise development. I am a level 4 in the coaching certification program in Canada. I teach at the University of Victoria, and I'm very fortunate to learn from coaches and athletes from diverse sports in my own practice as a performance psychology practitioner. So today's intention is really to open a dialogue in this very complex topic of decision making. The idea is to really present a few general concepts from my perspective, but I will encourage you to share your views. While I'm sharing my perspectives, perhaps the best is that you mute your mic and your video and interrupt me at any point to ask me a question or share your own views of the topic by opening up the mic and perhaps the video. So it creates a little bit more intimate conversation. So from my perspective, decision making is all about managing choice. And the choice will be grounded in information that you gather from answering these 3 questions. Who you're coaching, what you think is relevant to coach, and how you're coaching. So reflecting on the impact of your practice helps really to identify relevant information that the player identifies and learns, and thus informs a better decision making. So who you're coaching, it really takes understanding what are the motivations of the people that we're coaching, why they're in your program, what is the level of expertise, what is the level of competencies, and also is really to understand a little bit of the social cultural world and the support they have. So we might be coaching beginners or recreational, or maybe competitive at the regional level, or perhaps we're involved in coaching people at the master level. Nevertheless, they all need good decision-making training in order to maximize the enjoyment of the experience in the sport. Understanding in which stage they are, they also give us important information as to what kind of competencies in decision-making each player needs to develop. So answering the 3 questions helps you to understand how your existing knowledge really contributes and influence your decision making. But today's presentation and dialogue is all about how do we utilize certain tools to help in our practice so we impact positively the decision-making process of the athletes. And so it's all about identifying and reflecting what works and what doesn't work, try to modify the conditions so the learning occurs more persistently. So we're going to start looking for this video. And I wanted to ask you to just be mindful that when we observe the video is not from a judgmental perspective, but rather trying to be open as to what information do I gather, and in particular to our topic is about trying to discover how can we define decision making. We're going to review this video a few times. So we're going to see if it works. Everybody can see it?
Yes, yes.
Yes, it can see me.
Again, now when we watch this video, so who would like to say, well, what are your thoughts? What are your perspective on decision making? Anybody would like to see say how do you define decision making just by seeing a little bit of snap of this video?
Maybe sorry, it's Azalea here. Just some decisions were made by how Canada support the ball carrier, as well as the pressure being put on by the opposition.
Great. So there is decision making being in a position of defensive or in a position of restarting, so more creating an opportunity to attack. And there is also decision being made of trying to force people to something that it will help us to be in a position of advantage. Is that right, Acelia?
So, yes, yes.
So, great. So now I would like we're going to watch it again, but I want you to put a hat thinking that your role is to coach the team in red and white. So as a coach that you're observing, I want this time to think, okay, identify what are the demands in decision making in this particular scenario in your team. Also, I want you to think what kind of decision making your team is forced to make. And the third thing, I want you to think what influences are affecting your team in making optimal decision making. Okay, so 3 questions. So you're coaching team red and white, and you're looking for what are the demands in the decision making in this particular scenario. You're looking at what kind of decision making they are forced to make, and what is influencing an optimal decision making from your team. Okay, are we ready? We're gonna see it and we're gonna pause it again. Okay, there we go. Oh, nope. So we're going to watch it again. Again, we are looking for what are the demands in decision making of your team, white and red? What are they being forced to make? And what are the influences that are affecting their optimal decision making? Great. Any coach who wants to tell me, you're coaching the red team, what particular decision making are necessary in this particular scenario? Anyone?
Ivy, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I think initially when you start, the first decision has to be around your objective or your goal. So when they started, it's to outlet the ball successfully to move the ball forward. So the decision is how you're going to get the ball forward. That's your first question. That might be too simple.
Simple is good. Excellent. So how to move the ball forward. Great. What influenced that decision? Bernie, if I can ask you again, to you.
I think there's a few things that are going to influence. It's going to be where the other team is positioned. So what options are they giving you? Those would be decisions that you're forced to make based on the way they're positioning. And other influences, I think, are going to be, I know, the stage of the game we're at. What is the score? What is the stress level of the game at that point? How confident are the white and red team in their technical skills and ability? Yeah, some of those.
Yeah, great. So, very good. I mean, you answered two questions immediately. So they were forced to make a particular decision. So do we agree that we're forced to go right? Yes? Because the way that the blue team placed their forwards. Yes?
I agree that that's what the blue team was trying to do. The white team had an opportunity very early in the press, which was set up to obviously force them that way, to move the ball back and run across to the other side from the central floor, which they didn't take.
Sorry, it was a little bit difficult to hear. Could you?
I'm saying that I agree that that is how the blue team set up their press, but the white and red team kind of had an opportunity to move the ball back and run to the other side of the field very early in the press. And it may have been that player was under a lot of pressure because the press was aggressive and didn't pre-scan, so they weren't able to use that option or see it. But very early in the rotation, there's a pass back almost to a player standing on top of the goalkeeper that would have given them an outlet to the other side of the field.
Yeah, I couldn't. Your audio is a little bit difficult to hear, but I'm thinking that you're reading the options that you try to do. And my question to all of you is, what affected your team, the red and white team, to start their intent to move the ball up the field? What was a particular thing that affected their options?
Veronica, you have some comments on the chat.
Yeah, dime.
If you want to read it. Alex says, the blue team presses very well and the red team is influenced by playing to the right side.
Good.
We have another one. Says outlet principle, don't go to side without speed and space. and then I have a I don't agree. So, want to
What do?
open your mic? If you don't agree, you can open your mic.
Mhm.
Say what you don't agree.
I can't.
What do you don't agree?
Can you hear me? I'm
Okay.
not sure.
Yeah,
Yes.
perfect.
I think that I don't know their general outletting principles that they're being taught as a team, but it doesn't seem like they're reading for any possible solutions or strategies. And an overall principle is on the first pass for what I think is you don't pass to the sideline without speed and space as your first pass. So there could be taught other solutions to read the defense to get runoffs or reshape outlets like a ping pong that you could have a center mid present in, pop it back out, and move it around to try to collapse pressure and move it. I don't think they were under their first pass. They didn't even look to the left to see if there was another way that they could reshape their outletting structure. So that's why I don't agree that they had to go to the right. I think that they could have explored other options or been given other principles. And again, I don't know, so I can't assume what their principles are in outletting, reshaping.
Yeah,
There was
fantastic. Sorry, what's your name?
Ange?
And a fantastic comment. And this is what we wanted to do, right? These are just some perspectives that I'm presenting, but the intent is really provoke this dialogue. Okay, so bravo. I agree with you. I mean, why I selected this particular scenario is that as coaches, we know that, and like Bernie started today, it depends on the goal that we trying to achieve and how we have practiced that goal. But one of the things I wanted you to see is that if we have practiced certain things and the execution is tested in a game situation and something occurs that the time that we have in order to make the optimal decisions are jeopardized. So we need to see, okay, what are the elements that are influencing my players not to be optimal at that decision making. And one of the things I perceive in this particular scenario is that the first pass, it was not with an optimal speed. And that decreased the amount of time that the player receiving the ball had in order to make the next move. And so we don't know what was the plan, but we can see that the execution of a technical skill, it was not optimally performed. And so decision making, it is very, very complex. And so one of the things that we need to think is what cognitive skills are in play associated with also our technical ability to execute what is needed. So if we think in this scenario, we have a player in the D that probably is utilizing a problem solving, already set up to maybe shoot or pass the ball in a particular with a particular skill, and that requires a little further time. And in an attacking, I probably gonna feel that I can risk. But this is very different if I'm the defender. My technical and tactical demands will be very different. The time that I'm trying to do is reduce the time for the opponent, and the level of risk is much higher. And so how the cognitive skill is demanded and enforced for each particular person, it depends of the situation. And the same thing we can see the goalkeeper. He might be in a state of controlling and being patient, reading the space, yes, with intention to follow the ball, but also see where all the other players and the more risky areas in the field to move into. You have another player that is defending that perhaps is feeling that is out of position at that particular moment, but maybe he's thinking, what is the timing of the delivery of the pass? Again, is looking at the space and how to maintain calm and vigilant to what is needed to the person that is marking. And the person that is also with an attacking is alert to the anticipating if this is going to be a pass for him, maybe deflecting the ball into the net, or perhaps a follow-up rebound. And so being completely attentive to the information that is available for him. And of course, the other aspect is all the pattern recognition that has to constantly be happening. And as we know, our sport changes so much that this requires a certain amount of memory of things that have happened that we need to practice. But we need to practice recognizing what exactly is it that we need to attend to. So for example, I choose this video and I want us to pay attention to the hidden information. And it's blurry because I want us to just really see how difficult it is. How difficult it is to really identify the hidden information. So from my perspective, decision making is a very complex and dynamic cognitive process that requires information to plan, execute, and adapt to optimal actions. But this information has to be multisensorial. So vision, auditory, kinesthetic, and self. So all those integrated. As coaches, I think mostly we practice the kinesthetic part. Who can tell me who is practicing vision and auditory? Who doesn't know about your athlete's vision current state? Anybody? Anybody has tested your player's ability to see close, far, if their tendencies are stronger in the right side or in the left side? Anybody?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah. Cognitive performance is my pet peeve.
Great. So can you tell us about how do you, can you share a little bit?
So you will realize that some players have the ability to read the game better when they're on the ball than when they're off the ball. I've realized that a lot of players in the team that I was coaching last have what I call a switch on reflex. They're really good readers of the game on the ball, but when they don't have the ball, they don't have the discipline to keep scanning the field, and then their vision becomes very narrow, and they read the game in a smaller portion of the field than when they have the ball. So some guys will not be able to receive a ball and make an 80-yard pass because he wasn't on the ball. But that same guy, if he ran 5 meters with the ball, will deliver the 80-yard pass because on the ball, he has widened his focus to the entire game.
Right. And so you have a way to monitor this over time, or how do you go about knowing or matching what you observe and what the player perceive his or her ability is?
So we try to set up drills that force them to stretch their area of attention when they're on and off the ball. So therefore, when they're off the ball and they're about to receive the ball, we set up drills where the player that's receiving the ball is going to move from maybe over a distance so that he now has to pay attention to that player while he's off the ball so that when he gets the ball, he can deliver the pass. But that's
Great.
just a simple example.
Oh, fantastic. So, sorry, what was your name?
This is Nku from Trinidad.
And good, thank you. So you utilize a little bit, you manipulate the space and also the object by changing different target players to receive or to put pressure and so forth.
Correct.
Great. And you use different colors, for example, having all the players, maybe two different pennies is color and have a target player with a third different color, for example?
So what I've used a lot is sometimes to again widen the pre-scan ability and these kind of things. We play small games, 7-a-side with two balls, and the two balls have different colors and they have different points for when they score goals with which ball. So in real time, they're trying to focus on which ball is a threat and which ball is not a threat. And if both balls are a threat, then I can let the white ball score because it's one goal, as opposed to if the yellow ball scores, it's 5 goals.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Myself as well, I try to utilize different type of balls, right? Different colors. There are also different weight, size. And the idea to really develop the vision acuity is really force them to value an early detention of some nuance. And we'd be lying to say that the most thing that we are attracted to is to follow the ball. And perhaps this is the biggest mistakes that we do. Often decision making needs to be enhanced by observing everything else. So the space, where are my teammates? Where is the tendency of the opponent? So try to not be blind, but this magical object, and give more attention to value, to help athletes to really value understanding what are the other information that they can gather from around them to actually get the nuances that when a player receives the ball a certain position, it will inform them what the player might tend to do, where the player might move the ball to, or what the player perhaps psychological and emotional state is at. And so you wanted to really try to emphasize a vision, but also an auditory and self-awareness impact. And this is often in relation to the the influences of time. So in attack, for example, I wanted to create more time, and I can also risk more. But if I'm practicing defense, I want my defenders to know how to minimize time of the person that has to carrying the ball, and by understanding the risk associated by the area in which they're playing. The same talking is if I'm attacking, I wanted to create a big field versus if I'm defending, I wanted to create a small field. So this minimize the time that the attackers have. And the aspect of self is this collective synchronicity. So whatever I do, whatever I'm trying to decide, whatever information I'm gathering is something to serve the group. And how it was well presented earlier, what is the group's main goal? And so it also requires a choice in understanding the communication. So what is it that I'm hearing? What is it that I'm accepting? What is it that I'm really passing on to my colleagues in the field? And at the same time, what is my quality of effort to move with everybody when it needs to be? So it's almost learning to be attached by a string, that if one person moves, Everybody moves. And the third one is this idea of current state. So really monitoring to what extent fatigue maybe is impeding my attention to the important cues. Or maybe if I'm defending, to what extent knowing the level of risk, this is affecting my selection of appropriate tackling skills, for example. So in looking at decision making, there are 10, in my opinion, cognitive skills. And these skills are anticipation, attention, timely decision making, coupling with action, problem solving, focus and refocus on relevant information, memory retrieval, self-regulation of the emotional state, levels of concentration that change over a period of the game, pattern of recognition of what's happening, and the level of creativity that we allow ourselves to really expand. Because there are so many and they're all very complex, I thought that today we're going to start only with anticipation, and we're going to go through a few samples that I would like to discuss, and please give me your input. So the first one, anticipation, I wanted to share with you a 3-step model that is based on the work of Dr. Vickers. And the idea of the 3-step is that just to help us to design practice that will be very clear for athletes. What is the value and what is it that they need to do in order to move from good to great? So the first one is define what is it that you wanted to really practice. From those 10 skills, cognitive skills, really they're all important, but not at the same time. And so for today, we're going to just review anticipation. From that, I wanted to really design a drill that will best develop this skill. And to this, I want to use some cognitive triggers. So this might be a visual cues, auditory cues, reaction time cues, memory cues, kinesthetics, or self-coaching cues. And I will select a tool to develop it in my practice. And this would be basically, how do we design our practice? The ones that I suggest is utilizing variable and random practice. I utilize appropriate feedback. I utilize, especially for this time that we can use more time off the field, concept of modeling and internal mastery focus. So how does it work in practice? So anticipation, I would suggest, is the early recognition and prediction of an important cues. I follow 2 very simple questions, and only 2, and very simple because it's easy to remember. So to anticipate good, I need to think what is going to happen and how much time is there to read the cues. So if I look at this practice session of a goalkeeper, we're utilizing visual cues and object cues, right? So visual cues, maybe the post, we see how the goalie goes side to side to to touch either the post and a high little bag there. He knows that there is balls coming from 3 particular angles, And so he can practice, his lateral movement and a technical of receiving the ball with his feet or her feet. But to anticipate what's going to happen, this type of practice, block practice, doesn't really assist in developing that anticipation skill. So you wanted to be thinking about a skill and performance in a different time. And often when we are observing performance or the development of skill over time, we see something like that. We hopefully, with our coaching, we're helping the player to move from good to great. I think it really happens a little bit like this. It's not linear. It's ups and downs. The players one day are great. The same player in the afternoon is not so good. So how do we manage this? And so we observe. But what we observe at different particular time is how that player performed that skill. What I want us to think is that if we change our pattern to practice focusing on learning, but not necessarily so much on the performance, so we need to have an evaluation, how the player is learning to anticipate after a break. So if after a break, I see my player performing up there and say, hey, fantastic. This player is learning how to understand what is going to happen and knows how much time he or she has in order to manipulate that information. But if I see after a break that they cannot anticipate what is going to happen, or that they take too much time in trying to realize what is the most optimal solution, so I think learning has not occurred. So in variable practice, what we're trying to do is actually put the athlete in a situation that they can see some patterns, but the main parameters are changed. So performance, we see it in one particular moment, but learning, we want to see across periods of time. So for example, in this short video of variable practice, so we see an entries, from the sideline to the goalie, a different angle. So we see here a setup. So the drills start here, the player dribbles, and the goalie needs to make a decision. Why is variable is that there is a consistent, all the entries will be starting from the right side, for example, something that you manipulate. But what it changes is that you're giving the ball carrier the freedom that perhaps pass to the stroke, or maybe to go one-on-one, or maybe to start engaging the goalie in a different angle, either here or just baseline. So you wanted to have some variability. What is important also, just to develop the idea of anticipation cognitive skill, is that you allow the athlete, the goalie, to think after each session or each a series, a player that goes, and try to ask him or her, what do you see? What do you hear? So was somebody calling for the ball? Do you attend to that cue? So just giving a few different parameters that change over time. So with random practice, now the parameters are unpredictable. So if we see this video, is deflection skills. So as you see, and is from the goalkeeper's point of view, the ball is always changing. So again, if we avoid the goalie start only focusing on the ball, what kind of questions would you pose if you're trying to help her or him to develop anticipation with a random practice? Anybody? What kind of question would you ask? What kind of engagement would you have with that player? So nobody? So I wanted,
Can you repeat the question?
yeah, the question is, I present two different type of practice. One, we saw the first one, we saw actually the block, the athlete is practicing and knows the parameters. So different angles, so shift, stop, shift, stop. Then the next one is variable that I manipulate maybe the space, I manipulate a little bit the time, I manipulate maybe the distance or the passing angles, but manipulating and helping the athlete to recognize when is this angle, this may occur. When is this other angle, this might occur. So a little bit with variability, I'm changing few parameters and allowing the player to reflect, and so has an understanding that when something happens, these are the options. So when I see or when I hear something, I can anticipate that this might happen. And so just trying to practice with some certain level of control and giving the athlete a little bit an experience that they have control of that situation. With the last one, with the random practice that is from the goalkeeper's view, that is only a deflection or maybe the 9-yard specialist skill. Now, it's very difficult to anticipate, and it's very difficult to predict what is going to happen because it's always changing. So often it will be very low performance based. So it will be most likely that the goalie will be a kind of more struggling than really performing well. And so what kind of cues or what kind of feedback you as a coach you can ask to try to help the goalie to develop some anticipation in this ever-changing random practice? What would you ask the person, for example, to attend to?
Sorry. I was thinking maybe if it was like a deflection drill, like you were saying at the end there, was to look at the angle where the ball is coming from, looking at the angle of how the receiver or the tipper was going to take the ball. Are they taking it early? Is it on their closed side or the open side? In which case they can prioritize certain side of the net. And if they came a little closer, like you said, they would randomize their spacing. Can they close in and sort of take away the space from the tipper?
Fantastic. Sorry, who am I talking to? Listen to?
Azalea.
Oh, bravo, Azalea. No, this is great, right? I think, and if we want to push it a little bit further, is perhaps asking the goalie, can you see where the pass is coming from? So just to add a little more information, if you see that the pass is coming from the right, what are the options? If the pass is coming from the center, what are the options? Can you see the positioning of the feet of the person receiving the ball? Can you see where the stick is? Is it an open stick? Is it being open, or is receiving on the reverse? So you wanted to ask information that they are move away from just reacting to the ball. So you wanted to add them to move away if the ball went inside the net or not, or if they reacted okay, to see what Acelia was saying. A little bit, give them a guidance to start attending and moving their eyes to all the sources of information. Thank you, Celia. Anybody else?
Yes, and of course, well, hi, Veronica, this is Victor.
Victor.
Yeah, to keep an eye where there are more players coming into the area.
Yes, so
'Cause
this
not,
is a...
not only to,
Sorry, Victor, I lost you.
yes, sorry, no, it was not only your eyes, and of course, not on the ball, and of course in the details about the sticks and foot of our opponents, but yes, of course, uh, taking an eye to if there are going to be more players behind me or above me that could get into the area.
Great. Thank you, Victor, for sharing that, because this is the other aspect. So how much time do I need to know and get a big picture? And so questions to the athlete would be, before the ball was received, what was happening? Pay attention, just to reinforce them the value of the pre-scanning. And this is a little bit linked to our self-control. So yes, it's critical. Yes, it's a moment probably of high risk in defense, but this is a moment also that I have prepared for. So I need to be alert. I can be vigilant, but I need to take my time to slow things down. And this is really from us to stop the drills of making it continuous. Stop doing drills that are blocked in nature, but rather introducing times where we do a drill and we ask them questions. So here we have a little bit what research has told us about the frequency of our feedback. So if we see here in what you anticipate that yells better, immediately after or delay feedback? So which one do you think is better? The red or the blue? So this is the total, here will be how they perform the skill in a game. So they have transferred what they have learned during training or days of training, or it didn't happen during training. So this is how they transfer. So I wanted to just ask to reflect the important role of the frequency that we give feedback to the athletes. Which one do you predict would be better? That we use immediately after they do something and tell them a feedback, or delay our feedback? Any suggestions? Any wild guess?
Well, continued feedback would be my guess. That would be the better thing.
Great. Any other opinion?
How do you define delayed? How long is the delayed?
Delay is, for example, the questioning. Delay would be allow them to make mistakes and feel that there is no risk in training to make mistakes. So there is no threat as to being judged of making mistakes. So delay would be just allowing them to come to terms and figure how to do things better. Immediately will be I stop the ball and immediately my coach say good position. I lie down and say good timing. That's the difference.
For me, when we're introducing a new drill, if something's, really static and something you can count on, a lot of times we kind of let them roll through it for a while. Then we bring the group in and we discuss and ask questions about what kinds of things we can change. And then when we go back to that setting or more variable setting, that then it's more of the immediate feedback. Remember the question I asked you? You implemented that perfectly, or let's fix this thing.
Yeah. So the timing that is more a style. So you avoid individual, but rather you bring everybody, the collective. So it seems to me that helps also to have everybody the information. So I might not have been the drill, but I'm benefited by listening to everybody else. So by the time that is my turn, I already have some information that helps me in managing my own decision-making process. Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Because sometimes as a coach, I'm looking at one thing, but a lot of times, like other players will say, "Hey, have you thought about this?" Or "I noticed this." So, we're with so many people, sometimes it helps if you have just more than one opinion because, as we're a team, all the opinions of our teammates matter.
Yeah, thank you. So it is, in fact, for transfer, a delay approach. And delay approach would be also like the one that we just listened to. So things are happening. You might decide to review it later as a group. You also, and this is something that I'm discovering more and more and more, how little attention we put as coaches in learning from the athletes and allow the athletes to learn from each other. It's such a rich information that, again, because decision making is managing information, let's allow that information to occur, but let's avoid getting players to depend on our information. So that's why delay is better, is allows the athletes to take time to think, to put things together and to store, to use them when it's needed. This feedback style really allows a little bit this idea of self-regulating learning, and it's about exploring. Allow them to explore, allow them to frame the errors by producing new solutions, and also allows them to feel that you as a coach are trusting them in their input and their own capacity to make those choices. And this is something that we need to keep in mind. So as coaches, I think often we forget that during the game, they're on their own. And so we need to allow them to practice feeling that they have the ownership, of course, the responsibility to learn, but we trust them and respect their input. So this is very important aspect. Augmented feedback, this is another thing that I think, especially this time of the year, is to be mindful. What are the, during, and I hope what we all facing globally will be in some time soon better. But in the meantime, is really using the skills and the tools that allowing athletes to develop the repertoire of things that they do. In terms of developing vision agility, I I recommend, there's too many things out there, but I do recommend the iGym that is from a former field hockey player from South Africa, Dr. Calder. And the idea is just to practice memory, concentration, and eye movement. But this is just one part, and it needs to be actually parallel to things that are relevant. And so tools like this one that you as a coach are identifying certain scenarios. You ask questions to the athletes to see, okay, what is happening here? What did you see? What could you hear if this player goes up? What would be the language that is occurring? So the idea to utilize augmented video learning opportunity, it has to be a little bit monitored and guided. What is the intent? What is it that we want to do? And for today's example, if we're practicing only anticipation, so all the information has to be linked to that. So to those questions, what is it that we think is going to occur? And how much time in this scenario I have in order to make that decision? Also ask them their narrative. I find it very stimulating now that to ask them to tell the story and ask them to see, okay, with their own words, what is it that they see? Now that information is telling me what are the areas that I need to reinforce. Are they seeing the opponent, or are they seeing themselves only? Are they seeing spaces around them, or are they only seeing what is immediately to them, etc.? And so the other thing is to really take into account how do we use the elements of time, risk, space, collective synchronicity, and regulation of current state. So when we are designing practices, we need to think in terms of the two roles that we play, and perhaps the third one is the transition in between. So when we're looking at anticipation, utilizing time, in attack, I need to increase the time. So I gather more information, but it's totally opposite if I'm in defense, where I wanted to reduce the time. The same with the risk. I wanted to, in attack, I want to feel that I have a maximal amount of risk, but in defense, I have minimum amount of risk. And in space, the same apply. In attacking, I want to make a big field, but if I'm in defense, I want to make a small field. And in the collective synchronicity, it's all to do with a choice, a personal choice of the quality of effort in serving to create a big field, and my quality of effort in making a small field, for example, in defense. And this is really based on my development of how aware I am of my own response, and if I'm calm and decisive. And if not, what is it that I need to do? How do I develop more awareness of my responses when the need is in attack? Or how do I develop my awareness of what I need to be when I'm in defense or in transitions? Any questions so far? So for example, here we have an attack. of a good synchronized anticipation where I can see my players with a good position of head up. This means that they are looking not only the ball, but they are aware of everything around them. They are avoiding unnecessary one-on-one. The timing of the pass is correct, and the ball position is in order to maximize a space. In defense, a good synchronized anticipation. We see the off-ball position in times of the risk, the collective, and the time. And so what is it that we're reading? Today, we only look at the anticipation, but as we see, we have many other cognitive skills to develop. I want us to think that decision making is the ability to make the best choice between a set of alternatives. This ability is so critical in our sport. But the most important part is that it can be learned. And so decision making, in my perspective, is managing all that information. And so create this self-awareness in us that we see, we help athletes to see the value, to reflect what works. And so do more of that, what works for me. And what does not work, to strategize that improvement. And the idea is to create constantly scenarios that forces players to think and take ownership of this scenario. What we saw very briefly today is a 3-step of a training design. First indicates that you have to make a decision of one of the cognitive skills. Today we look a little bit at anticipation. Then you want to design a skill with a cognitive trigger. It might be visual, it might be auditory, it might be a self-coaching cues. But not all of them are important at the same time. That's why you need to strategize. And the third step is to really select one training tool. So it might be a variable practice sometimes random practice. It might be the use of different feedback tools or modern strategies. But the idea is that we focus on learning during training, so performance occur in the transfer after that pause. So when we are trying to engage the athlete to look for audited and visual cues, all the nuances that happen in training is about learning. Not so much triggering, okay, did you do it well or not? It's about the thinking, the creating narrative. I saw this and I think this might occur. Or by seeing this, I have this much amount of time in order to make and plan my action plan. So in concluding, I just wanted to, my final thoughts, to just ponder a little bit what, as coaches, often we think we need to have all the questions and create conditions for athletes to actually learn what we think is important. I think it is important also to remember that they will continue to be engaged in learning if they love learning, if they really anticipate that by them being engaged in their own process of learning, the possibilities are fabulous. So thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. Tite, I don't know if you want to come in. I will ask you to take 5 minutes and give us your feedback. It's really important for us to keep improving and keep posting interesting topics for you. Tite, would you like to say something?
Yes, please.
Have we lost?
Well,
Okay.
first of all, thank you very much, Veronica, for your presentation. I think it was very clear, very useful. It's a topic that generally we as coaches talk a lot about decision making, but we didn't have the chance to explore a little bit more how the factors that influence decision making and also the way that we have to communicate with as players to improve decision making and also designing exercise. From my point of view, I think that one of the big thing is the communication skill and give the chance to the player always to say something. The contribution that we have from the player is tremendous. We usually, as coaches, we don't take too much attention to the information that the players can give us. I think it was very good. I think we have the chance to touch about this point because many places that can talk about this topic, because of you were a player of the club, you were an international player for Canada, you are a path coach for American Hockey Federation, and you also are a professional person, actually, that work with players, psychology and everything, And I think your environment and your point of view is very open. I think it was a fantastic talking. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
one of
you,
the
Veronica.
things that, one of the things that, thank you, Chicha, for your comment. One of the things I think we have to remember, our sport is that it's all about decision making, and perhaps it's one of the things why we like it, because it's always changing, it's always positioning us to think. One, as a coach, there's many other ways to actually improve our own decision making in training or in competition are totally different, or even post competition to plan. There are many different demands that are required. But I think it's part of why we like this game. It proposes so many dilemmas that we need to value that. We need to, of course, we need to enhance our competitive drive and our, ways to try to seek new forms to do something better than how we did it yesterday. But the way to go about that is to really encourage that it's not just physicality, it's not just by trying hard, it's not just by pushing hard and training more, it's by increasing the quality. The quality is increased by allowing and valuing this part of the creative and critical thinking. And I couldn't agree more with Chiche. The biggest source of knowledge is your athletes and your colleagues. One of the positive things of what is happening, unfortunately, in the world now is this opportunity. Often we are so busy doing, so busy coaching, so busy working, that we don't allow ourselves time to do this. I mean, I'm amazed with the list of coaches in this and today that, we need to do more of this and collaborate and say, I cannot get my players to understand anticipation. Anybody, how did you do it? Because one thing is to know the theory, and another is how do we transfer the theory in that practical scenario when you have a kids that the only thing they want to do is hit the ball, or when you have players that are exhausted, or players that are just coming out of an injury, and so they're feeling the risk within the team. So I think it's the collaboration and being open to that with colleagues and being challenged and not think that you have all the answers. I think is when it gives you plenty of room to continue growing. So thank you very much for your input. And if anybody wants to contact me directly, happy to share the presentation or any resources that I have.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Veronica. Thank you, teacher.
Sure.